Folks, welcome to Community Analyst. I've got 4 words. What's not to love? What's not to love? Community Analyst has lots of interesting, fascinating, and very useful connections to education. Why would you use it? How would you use it? That's our session for today. And thanks for joining me. Joseph Kursky here on the Esri Education Outreach team at your service. I also teach at the University of Denver and happy to be here. Happy that you are here. We wouldn't do this without you folks. You folks are the heroes. So let me do this. Let's briefly outline what we're going to talk about here in this session. Why would I use Community Analyst? I'm going to show you some examples, but I also want you to explore on your own. So even though this is a short and sweet session, I want to have most of the time actually not me expounding on the wonders, the glories of Community Analyst, but rather to have you actually dip into the tool, okay? Good to have you folks joining us. In a nutshell, I believe that Community Analyst does have great utility. It is part of the K-12 site license, the school account license. Also, for those of you that are at community colleges or technical colleges or universities, it's probably included in your campus-wide license, okay? So it's one of those underutilized tools, in my opinion, that should be used more. And I'll explain why here in a bit, for a couple of these reasons. In terms of professional development, I believe that there are some key reasons to use it. First of all, as the name implies, it's all about community. But don't let that limit you. You can also look at regional patterns and national patterns. And guess what? As I'll demonstrate in a moment, Community Analyst is actually not just for the USA. No. So I was teaching in Australia about a year ago. Good day, mate. And I used Community Analyst quite a bit down there for analyzing community demographics, consumer preferences, and other things that we'll look at. Now, sure, you're going to, as you probably know from being a geospatially minded professional, that you're not going to get the same amount of data for Uzbekistan as you will for Canada or the US. No. But that said, there are at least 150 countries that are inside Community Analyst, and more being added. So it is an international tool set. Now, to access it, you can access it in a couple of different ways. You can go to your ArcGIS Online account, and if you're the administrator, you can authorize users into Community Analyst with that gridded 3x3 box that's in the upper right of that ArcGIS Online organizational account. That's one way to get into it. And then you just, and then not only do you authorize it there, you can actually access it there. What we're going to do is method B, which is going into communityanalyst.arcgis.com and accessing the tool that way, okay? But you've got to be enabled to use it in your organization. So usually it's the, well, always it's the administrator of that ArcGIS Online account that'll give you access, okay? So that's great. Let's go ahead and outline briefly what we're going to go into. We're going to look at convenience stores for a couple of reasons. A, students have familiarity with these things. They're not like, you know, some sort of foreign business that they have no concept of. Just about everybody on the planet has been to some sort of convenience store. We're also going to use that basis as a springboard for looking at other capabilities inside Community Analyst, okay, folks? Now, I would like to mention that inside your zip file in the box folder is the full lesson that I would highly encourage you to go through at some point. I'm only going to dip into a little bit of it. We're going to look at convenience stores and a little bit of demographics and a little bit of consumer preferences and infographics and things like that. But this lesson, it's not too long, but it's actually looking at regional convenience stores, and you can see that I've got a couple of screenshots in there because, as we'll talk about, Community Analyst looks a little bit like ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro, and then there's also some key differences too. So it doesn't look exactly the same. It was developed by an entirely different development team to focus on non-GIS users, and that is where I think it has great utility in education, because your students, your fellow faculty that you're training don't have to be GIS gurus to use, okay? And so in the lesson, you dip into something that we definitely won't cover in this short segment here. At the end, you look at one community and you compute some drive times. Okay, where's the best location for a new convenience store? And I chose Columbia, Missouri. You can choose anywhere you want. But then we compute some walk times, drive times, and then have students thinking about how long will people be amenable to driving or walking to a convenience store versus a IKEA right at the other end of the scale, right? IKEA's got this huge catchment area, right? But a convenience store is 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I mean, how long would you commit to accessing one? So remember, that lesson is sitting there in your zip file, okay? So I wanted to mention that. And then these slides are also there. Also, last thing to mention in terms of resources, we've got some questions for you to think about as you work through these examples in this lesson. From where do you access it? What is Community Analyst good for? How would you use it in an instructional professional development setting? And so on, okay? So that's it there. That's in there. It's starting at 3-22. Okay, let's get rolling with a demo, if you don't mind. First of all, I'd like to show you that when you go to communityanalyst.arcgis.com, you're going to get a login screen. Looks very similar to ArcGIS Online, right? And the reason why is because guess what? This is all based on ArcGIS. It's all the same system. It's all the same platform. And that's what's great about this, because you can move data from Community Analyst into ArcGIS Online, and you can also move data from ArcGIS Online into Community Analyst. Now think of the implications of that, folks. That means that you create a data set inside Community Analyst with the tools that it's got and the business data and so on. You can move it into ArcGIS Online and use it there. Oh, and vice versa. Oh, that's pretty exciting. So once you log in, don't completely skip over this step-by-step guided tours. It's going to look a little different, as you can see here. There's this sort of orange box. Pay attention to this. You want to run a report? Try it. You want to create a color-coded map, a choropleth map, right? It's even, the vocabulary is such that you don't have to be a geography or GIS person to use this. So color-coded map, choropleth map, we all know it as, right? But don't ignore this orange box, okay? Now, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to map two variables. So for example, if I pull this particular map up, look, notice on the left side, it's got the level of geography. Right now I'm looking at counties, and I'm also looking at USA. I could change the level of geography. I could also lock the level of geography, so if I zoom and pan, I'm still at counties. See, you're already dipping into some of the capabilities here that ArcGIS Online doesn't even have. So let's say let's say my problem is I want to look at possibly starting like a new dog kennel service. Okay, so I want to look at where people own more than 2 dogs, 2 or more dogs, and where they travel. And so they would want to have a kennel service. So notice here on the left side, I can look, I've got numbers, average, and index for one thing. I'm looking at index right now. So if I go up to 100, right, that is the mean for the USA. But notice the distribution. You even get a little idea of what the histogram looks like. So if I've used these slider bars, I'm only getting the people that travel more. Yes?
Sorry, it's Mike Campanovo. We're only seeing your PDF.
Ah, okay. No worries. Let's stop share and let's share screen again. Desktop. Yep, let's do this. Thanks for the tip. How about this?
Thanks.
Okay, cool. So as I'm scrolling around, look, notice how these counties appear and disappear. Ooh, and then on the top variable, household owns 2 or more dogs. So if I scroll around here, I'm going to see this change. Oh, wonderful capabilities. So one of the things that you can do from that is now I want to create an infographic. And so I've created one for one of the counties that showed up as being high percentage of dog ownership, and they travel quite a bit, and that's this county west of Chicago. So if I look at this particular county, I created an infographic. You guys probably know that this is drawing from that tapestry data and other things. So you get this really nice one-page infographic. Again, capabilities that you don't have in any other tool. So take advantage of that. One more thing, here's what we're going to do when you go into the actual demo and the lesson. What you're going to do is you're going to create maps from data. And what I did a moment ago is I did a smart map search, 2 or more variables. What I'm going to do right now, demonstrate for you, is a business and facilities search. So if I look at businesses and facilities, what I'm going to look for is a certain kind of convenience store, Allsups. So some of you know this. Allsups is a regional convenience store centered, well, I'm not going to tell you. You tell me. So look, I've got all kinds of business names in here. If I hover over only, I'm only going to get the Allsups convenience stores. In other words, I don't care about Allsups lawyers or Allsups florists or anything else. All I want is the Allsups convenience stores. And I can also filter it on number of employees and sales volume and so on. So you've got lots of capability here. Then I'm going to go to next, and as you can see here, I'm going to change the symbol, And so that's great. And then I'm going to save this as all subs T3G, so I'll know it's the one I created at T3G. Now, notice this, folks. Notice how it's got this perfectly sort of oblong shape to it. It's clustered, so I could even zoom in here and see all the locations of all subs. It's a regional business, right? It's not national like Circle K or 7-Eleven. And you could probably, one of my questions in the lesson is, as I zoom in and I see these numbers, those correspond to the number of locations of these convenience stores in each of these locations. So I want the students to figure out, based on this distribution, tell me the location of their headquarters. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to look at Casey's. Casey''S. Some of you are from the Midwest and you've seen these all over the place. Casey's General Store. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to actually have you go to the lesson where you're going to go into communityanalyst.arcgis.com, and I want you to log in with your T3G credentials, your T3G login. So communityanalyst.arcgis.com, log in and do a smart business search and search for Casey's, Casey''S. I also then, as you can see here, it's very similar to the all subs demo. Change the symbols if you want, and then try to figure out where Casey's HQ is located. And then if you've got a few more minutes, explore convenience stores in your own community. So zoom into your own community and do a search on convenience stores and see if you can map those. All right, I'll turn you loose for a few minutes and we'll come back and we'll summarize and then we'll go back to the main room. Thanks. Let me know if you've got any questions. Dominique, yes. BAO is really the same tool as Community Analyst. They're supposed to diverge at one point in the past, but they never have. So Business Analyst Online, yeah, if you've got business or economics interested students, for example, it's the same tool really as this. There's a couple of changes in the vocabulary, but they're virtually the same thing. The coloring looks different, but yeah, very good. All right. So your folks are saying that the Community Analyst doesn't have the T3G account doesn't have Community Analyst enabled. That could be a problem. Well, let's rectify that. And it might be that if you're brand new to the T3G account, like today, maybe you came in after we enabled it. That could be. So I've sent a note to our team in Redlands, and hopefully they'll get everybody enabled here in a moment. All right, folks, in the interest of getting back to the main room at some point, I know this was pretty brief, but when you're done mapping cases, and if you only map the convenience stores, you should see something like this. And I'll let you keep working while I'm summarizing, especially for the benefit of folks that actually can't get into the community analyst right now. Charlie's messaging me that it should be enabled now for everyone. But if you have trouble, just give a holler. Anyway, hopefully you're seeing some of the, wow, this is something that I'd actually be able to use. So, a couple things. A, you've got two clusters. Notice how they don't infringe on each other's territory. You've got cases up here, Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, etc. One of the questions that I ask in the lesson is where is the headquarters? And it turns out to be in Des Moines. And then you've got the Allsups down here, West Texas, New Mexico, Buddy Holly country. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. The other thing that I mentioned earlier is a couple of really important things. Look, add data. And look, one of the add data is web maps and layers. Ooh, from ArcGIS Online. So again, you can add data from your ArcGIS Online. And then what about the other direction? Over here on the right side, you've got some tools. Share map to ArcGIS. So this is where if you want to share what you've created here over to ArcGIS Online, you can do that. So it works both ways, as I mentioned. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, see up in the upper right here, where I've got USA? Look, this is where you would change it to, I want to look at France now, or Australia, okay? The other thing that I wanted to point out is that in the lesson, I actually have you go into, as I indicated, I'm going to zoom in, and we're going to go zooming right over here to Columbia, Missouri, okay? So as I go down to Columbia, I'm going to zoom over there, okay? So in here, we actually then, in Columbia, look at, okay, where are the convenience stores in Columbia? We're going to compute a drive time to them, 5, 10, 15 minutes, or you could do 1, 3, and 5 miles, whatever you want. And then, okay, based on that, where are the overlapping territories for those buffers? And then where would I put one based on this? And also, what I have in the lesson is, as you probably are aware, one big draw for convenience stores is lottery tickets. So I actually, one of the variables in here, and again, there's this wealth of variables in here. If you went to census.gov, where I used to work, I mean, nothing against census.gov, but you'd be spending weeks getting that data and putting it in here. That's all at your fingertips. And not only the census data, but detailed demographics, but also this consumer preference data, like who buys lottery tickets, who bicycles to work, who's bought a bicycle for their child in the last 12 months. All that stuff that we actually purchase from, ask the students, where did this come from? From credit card companies, so people's purchases. So it borders on the semi-creepy because it's just incredibly detailed. So yes, so some credit card info from other countries as well as some other sources. But yeah, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But half the students, as you indicated earlier in the big room, be critical of the data. Where did it come from? Can I trust it? And so on. How detailed is it? Well, my uncle Henry lives over in that block group or that census tract, but he doesn't fit the tapestry, for the whole. So get them to think about individuals versus aggregates in the neighborhoods. Last thing to mention, and that is, so 3 main advantages: easy to use tools, wealth of data, and the back and forth between ArcGIS Online. Now, I've used this in many settings. I don't use it in every single professional development institute. I've used it in business schools, in universities, economics. I use it to get the math teachers at the K-12 level interested, and also, an intro tool. Here's something that is sort of, it's an app, right? It's a web app. It does a few things and it does them well. All right, let's have a short discussion here. Page 325 in your PDF. It's also a good research tool for students. Let me share the PDF here. What do you think of this, folks? Here's some questions to think about. You folks seeing this all right? Here are our questions from the workbook. From where do you access Community Analyst? I'm going to if you folks want to share some microphones, we only have 17 people in the room, so we could do that for a minute. Feel free, or you can just use the chat box. Yeah, Peter, if you don't have access, we'll get Charlie and Laura to give you access for T3G, but long-term solution, whatever account you're using, make sure that you've got access there from your administrator of the account. Yeah, absolutely, Dr. Rich, I'm totally with you. If students don't care about watersheds, I mean, we hope they do. Watersheds, biomes, weather, they'll know their own community. Where are the bicycle stores? Where are the the music stores, the etc. Right? The convenience stores and so on. So in looking at this, as you know, uncovers lots of really interesting patterns in cities. Some of them are quite disturbing. So get the students to think about disparities between income and education and so on in communities. Absolutely, yeah. So a couple of things to think about here as we go through. I'd like you to think about, let's see here, let's go community analyst, you're looking at that. I've got a couple of questions here. What did you discover or encounter? Did anything surprise you? I'm hoping you're not bored, for one thing. To me, this is like my precious, the amount of data and the tools here are just really phenomenal. Yeah, there's the granularity on people's purchasing of food, for example, Michael. Yeah, absolutely is amazing. Who's bought natural or organic bananas, versus standard bananas? That kind of stuff is in here. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Philip. And I'm a data geek. I spent years at USGS and Census and NOAA, data gathering organizations. So, and I know many of you but then again, the challenge is, right, how do I use this to attract people to it rather than kind of scare them away because there's just so much to do? Really, it only does a couple of things. It makes infographics, choropleth maps, and you can map businesses. And those are the core things that it does. And, within that, filtering, multivariate, and so on. But really, those are the three things it does. But it's associated with this wealth, this boatload, this armada load of data. Very cool. Yeah, so when you search, there's several different searches. I'm getting so there's a search for places, and then there's also a search for data. And if we search for businesses, you got to make sure you narrow it. You can narrow it on industry classification code and some other methods, so that you're not getting, in my example, Casey's lawyers and Casey's florists. I'm only wanting the convenience stores. Oh, very cool. Yes, Nicole, I'm right with you. All right, I think I'm getting a ping from Laura, but let me check in. I think we may be called shortly back to the main session, but we'll just continue to hang out here and give you more time to play before we are forced to go to the main room. Absolutely. Yeah, Michael. Michael's asking, hey, can I share a data set from Community Analyst? It's an odd concept, but I've actually had success sharing a data set from Community Analyst and making it public in ArcGIS Online. When you think, how would that work? Because this stuff is sort of locked into Community Analyst. It's part of the Community Analyst set of data. How do I make that public? Well, you actually can. There may be limits on it, but I haven't encountered any. So if I wanted to share my convenience store analysis out, I could do that. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, but why would I want to do that? Well, then other people could actually look at it, and then I've got the analytical capabilities in ArcGIS Online, like buffering, overlay, things like that I actually don't have in Community Analyst. See, so you've got to, by putting it in ArcGIS Online, you can, of course, also make a story map out of it, etc., another web mapping application. But you also have the capabilities of ArcGIS Online analytical tools, as you know. And going the extra distance, what if you even brought this, now that it's in ArcGIS Online, it's a data service, right? What if you brought it into Pro, ArcGIS Pro, for further analysis? Oh gosh, I know that's sort of the deeper end of the pool. You probably wouldn't do that in a standard, intro professional development workshop, but lots of capabilities there. All right. So yes, Laura just emailed me and said we've got 5 minutes left. So we're already into our discussion. And probably I started the discussion just a bit too early. So if you want to play around with community analysts some more, I'm not going to force you to discuss, because you're probably like me. Ooh, I want to have a few more minutes. So we'll let you do that. I'm going to do the same. Folks, I've just, as you can see here, I'm hoping you're seeing this. Wichita, fairly flat, south central Kansas, rock chalk. I could even teach about topography and the physical barriers to 5, 10, 15-minute walk times, drive times, etc. This is fairly flat, right? So you're getting this nice, and especially it reflects the public land survey system. So you get this sort of diamond shape because of the public land survey system. If I did this in Colorado or California or New Hampshire, mountains of New Hampshire, right? I'd get topographic influences on drive times and walk times, in part based on street pattern, but which is all based on topography, right? So or a large part of it anyway. So it's just fascinating the kinds of things you can thread in here, which is of course why many of us love teaching with, well, all of you, why many people love teaching with GIS. It's not just about the tools, the capabilities. There's so many other things you can get into, like where did the data come from, and the influence of topography in this case, and why does IKEA have a much larger catchment area than a convenience store, and getting the students to think about where would they locate these things in the first place? Why are they on these major intersections? Why aren't they on some little city street somewhere in the case of convenience stores? So you can get into zoning and traffic, and even with gas stations, which, as you know, are a big source of revenue for convenience stores, the right-hand turns, right? They oftentimes look at the right-hand turns into a place, especially like a convenience store, rather than a left-hand turn. Of course, if you're in Australia or Japan or the UK, left-hand turns would be easier for people, right? Because they're driving on the left. But fascinating to be able to think about that in terms of the lessons that you're teaching. So, and a lot of these things that we incorporate, right? They're 1, 2 minute, maybe 5 minute conversations. So we're not talking about, spending days talking about these things, but I just think it's wonderful. Yeah, there's some curious gaps oftentimes. So if you have local knowledge, you can ask the students, hey, is there a business missing, or something else that might be missing from the data set? Yeah, all maps are imperfect representations of reality, right, folks? Very convenient, very useful oftentimes, but definitely representations of reality and not reality. So, yep, awesome. Oh, very cool, Jack. Super. Well, we aim to please. All right, folks, we are probably down to the last minute here. So let me go to the last slide. And we've already chatted just ever so briefly about what was surprising, etc. And hopefully you will be encouraged to use this at some key points with your students, with fellow educators, with fellow faculty, deans, other departments on campus, etc., or in your school district, or in your local region. And last thing is, we can hang out here until Laura gives us the high sign, but we're going to go back to the full group, and I hope that was of benefit. I know there's a lot of good choices in these sessions, but thanks for being with me. Does anybody else have any lingering, wonderful tidbits to share? All right, Laura's texting me. We got to go back. All right, folks. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the main room. Thanks for the kind comments. Rock on, Michelle. Yep, you betcha. Map on.